Hi everybody, welcome back. Glad you could tune in again. Okay, so let's carry on thinking about work a little bit and pick up from one of the insights that I highlighted for you yesterday. That is, the recognition that the so-called cultural mandate or creation mandate or dominion mandate of Genesis chapter 1, 26 to 28, the calling to fill and subdue the earth, take dominion over it as creatures in the image of God, the recognition that all that has something to do with our work. That is a wonderful rediscovery, and is actually a Reformation rediscovery which saves us from the medieval misunderstanding that the only work that's really of value to in the Lord's sight is clerical work or monastic work. In fact, all labour is of value in the sight of God. However, even here, it's possible for us to run away with a misunderstanding. It's possible for us to get the idea that the work, quote unquote, that text has a connection with ought to be identified with the job I have or with the career I have. And what that then does is it has a tendency to marginalise other things which form significant parts of our lives in which we are also actually called to be filling and subduing the earth. Let me give you one very obvious example of this. It's to do with fathers. I mentioned yesterday, of course, that the glorious dignity of being a mum and raising children. What ought to be obvious, of course, is that fathers are called to share in that responsibility as well. And it's important to recognise that that's part of their Genesis 1:26 to 28 calling, as well as it is part of the calling of their wives, the mothers of their children. Here's the danger, though. What can easily happen is we end up equating the Genesis 1 stuff for men with my career. So we end up thinking, well, I go out to work, that's how I fulfill my vocation to fill and subdue the earth. My wife looks after and educates the children, that's how she fulfills her vocation to do that. Well, of course, that's a misunderstanding. It's much better, it seems to me, to think of your career or your job, the thing you get paid to do, not as equivalent to your calling in the world, but as a part of your calling in the world. And therefore, for example, for a husband and a father, another huge and significant part of what we are called to be and to do in the world is to raise our children. Now, of course, what that does then is if we think of our lives in that way, we are able to think more holistically, so to speak. We don't think, well, here's my job and that occupies this portion of my attention in my life, and then all the other stuff is basically recovering from the exertion, trying to get myself together so that I can arrive at work at my desk on Monday morning at whatever time you have to get there, so you can do the same thing again. And then we're trying to find some sense of encouragement that that's what we're called to do. That job is what we're called to do, but it's part of what we're called to do. It's just as much a part of our calling to be engaged in our families' lives when we come home from work and so on. Now, the way that we work that out, no pun intended, will vary tremendously depending on what career we're following. For some men who work in an office somewhere, obviously the way in which you structure the time with your family and the responsibility you take for them, leading them in worship, praying with them, encouraging them, just being a part of your family's life, planning their upbringing and discipline and all those things, all the many different things that we do for our families. The way that somebody does that if they're working in an office somewhere is going to be different from how a man is able to do it if he's working from home or if he's able to work at home part of the time. Of course, we all have weekends, but for some people, weekends are as much work some of the time as Monday to Friday is for the rest of us. All of us are working different schedules, doing different kinds of things. But here's the key insight. For men in particular, if we're able to think of our calling, our vocation, indeed our work, as including our job for which we get paid, but not being limited to that. Of course, the situation needs to be reconfigured slightly again. If you're in the kind of work, paid work, which is running your own business or something like that, where you don't receive a wage from somebody else, you don't sell your time to them, but you're building or doing something yourself, of course, then the same kinds of principles apply. That's not the whole of our calling, it's a part of it. This can also have some fruitful implications, I think, for men and women who are thinking about what kind of future they'd like to have. I'm thinking of younger folks, teenagers, younger adults and so on, people at college. It's very common to start thinking about your future in this kind of a way. What am I good at? What do I really like to do? And you might have a list of things that you really enjoy. And then if you read or listen to the widespread careers advice that you'll find yourself encouraged to pursue what you're passionate about. And that may be very good advice. It may be that, as you look at your portfolio of academic abilities, you're better at one area than another, and it would make a huge amount of sense for you to pursue some kind of career in an area which corresponds to subjects that you're good at. But let me highlight how that same kind of thinking can lead us down a bit of a blind alley. Let's imagine, for example, as a friend of mine here in London, this is genuinely true of him, imagine that you're a really talented piano player. Somebody says, what are you really passionate about? You say, well, I'm really passionate about my music. Of course, what's the advice that such a young man is likely to receive? Well, go and pursue a career in music, in playing piano professionally. And now you can start to see where the problems might arise. Because actually, if you really love to play the piano, it might be that being a professional pianist, making the piano playing the thing that you're paid for, is really wise. But it might not be. And a certain amount of wisdom is necessary to assess whether that's going to be right for you or for this young man. It's easy to imagine, for example, and this is certainly true in that particular industry, which, having had a chat with this guy, I know a little bit about. It's easy to imagine that a very high percentage of people who really love playing piano and go into the music industry because that's what they really want to do, spend most of their time travelling from place to place, answering emails and playing sessions in a recording studio, playing the kind of music they don't really like because they've simply got to pay the bills. The number of people who really get to play the kind of music they love professionally is very small. So what could this young man do? Well, he could find himself any other career to support himself, something gainful and fruitful that he was good at, and then he could set himself free, so to speak, with other parts of his life to play the kind of music that he really loves. There are gazillions of churches around here in London. Many of them have pianos in, and a good number of them give free concerts at lunchtimes. If you really love playing the piano, you could imagine this young man saying to himself, you know what, it's just easier for me to go get a job in IT or something else that I enjoy and devote myself to playing piano in my spare time. Now here's the crucial insight, going back to where we were in Genesis 1. Here's the crucial insight that text would bring to that situation. It would highlight that what he does in his spare time, playing the piano, is as much a significant part of who he is, from God's perspective, than it would be if he were doing that and being paid for it. In other words, if we really loved something, playing the piano, carpentry, sport, I don't know, tennis or baseball or something like that, in order for us to do that and for it to be part of our lives, it doesn't have to be the part of our lives that we get paid for. And I want to encourage you, if you're thinking about your future, to cast the net a little wider, to consider that of all the many different things that you love to do, you don't have to make them all the thing you get paid for. There are many, many other ways to enjoy and contribute to the world that God has placed us in, besides making it our career. And to recognise that can increase the flexibility with which we view the decisions we have to make in the future. And all of that flows from the recognition that not just our 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 job, but the whole of our lives count as what it means from God's perspective, to fill and subdue the earth, to take dominion over it as image bearers. Okay, I hope that's helpful to at least some of you. The Lord bless you, and I hope very much to see you soon. Bye for now.